So, most people that live in small countries make films in their country, but they dream of going to the United States to make films. But you did it the other way around.
Yes, well, I lived in New York City for 10 years, and so that's where I made some short films, and I went to film school at Columbia. Um, Prior to that, I had gone to a small evening program in film in my early 20s, where I learned just the general basics. But yeah, so I spent 10 years in New York making 4 short films, and then in 2011, 3 years after the economic crisis, I moved back to Iceland to make my first feature that I hope to make very soon. Took a little bit of time to finance and write and create the material, but yeah, that um, America. But yeah, I preferred for my first feature to be European, if it be made in Iceland, and I was had my share of New York City for after the 10 years.
Will your next film be in Iceland too?
I hope so. I hope my first next film is in Icelandic, if they'll fund me again.
But you still don't have a film school, right? In Iceland?
Not on a university level, no.
Still, so many good films are coming out of Iceland.
Everybody knows to leave, and then they come back.
Yes, and you came back, and your story is very much an Icelandic story, but also an international story. So I was just thinking, how were your two protagonists, two women, two different stories that come together? Were they born at the same time, or?
No, actually, I left New York City in 2011, and I knew I was going to make a feature film. That was the plan, and it was only 3 years from the economic crisis in Iceland, and so I had made a short film about a victim of the economic crisis. So I was thinking about people that would lose their homes, have to move into the car. And so I had a character that I was writing, which was this Laura woman with her child, the cat, living in the car and trying to kind of make this adventure trip out of a a bit of a tragedy. And as I was writing, this scenes and figuring out where it would go, I knew I needed a little bit more, and I took the work to a workshop in America when they said, you need more characters in your film, is what they said. And they said, it feels very European. Okay. So that seemed to be a bit of a problem. But I didn't really mind the European comment, but I did understand that something, I wanted to do more. And so returned to Iceland to continue with this script. And somehow all of a sudden I felt like every day I would read about a refugee in crisis, trying to get out of their situation, set themselves on fire, go on hunger strike or something highly tragic. And it just, all of a sudden I felt like the stories were everywhere. They may not have been everywhere, but when you start to notice something, all of a sudden you observe every, last detail of it. And that's when I thought, this is the movie I want to make. And then I thought, well, I already have this other character. So being a little bit lazy, I thought, okay, well, I'll use what I already have. And I want to connect two women, an Icelandic woman and a refugee in crisis, and see what I can create from that. And
you also, as I understood, worked with refugees?
Yes, exactly. So it's a bit of a blur in my mind at the moment what came first, but having read about this, all of a sudden I was like, I'm going to become a volunteer at the Red Cross. So I became a volunteer, and I was teamed up with, or they give you, it's called félagsvinur, which means like a friend of somebody. And my friend was a woman from Uganda who had fled Uganda due to not being able to live there because of her sexuality. She told me her entire story. And so this all kind of, when you're a screenwriter, everything you hear is potential material. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have a character from Uganda. And, then, of course, I started worrying about I have to learn more. So I read everything I could read. I drove to these asylums where they would house refugees, and Iceland is very small, so there's just kind of one area where at the time I would go. It was called Fit Hostel, and the place that you see here is kind of a replication. We did try to film there, but they were, I mean, at the point we were filming, it was already closed down because it was too shady, and it was just not really proper living conditions. But we were like 200 meters away is where we filmed our exteriors, and so I visited some people and I heard their stories, and sometimes they would be like, who's this woman asking these questions, and they thought maybe I was a spy from the government, and there's a lot of suspicion because everybody has a story, and they don't, sometimes they're aware that they maybe didn't do something that's considered legal, or there's just a lot of fear. So there's a fear of revealing too much that could work against your case, because everyone has a case. And so this was just me, collecting everything I could collect, and then trying to figure out, how do I make this film. But but with all these stories, I knew my movie is going to be about one woman that will hopefully be able to reflect on the rest of the people who are essentially, what they all have in common is they're all kind of homeless. Everybody's looking for a home. That's what they're trying to do. And then the governments make it complicated, put people in jail, and do all these things, which doesn't, of course, help the people who have already been on the road and the run for a long time.
But the place that she's in is like a kind of a detention center, or what would you
It's called an asylum in Iceland. It's not detention. It's basically it's kind of like being in storage. Like you have to go to prison because you committed this terrible crime of not having a proper passport, and once you're out, either you can be deported, or you have a place to stay. But the place to stay, you can't have a job, you can't really have a life. You're just in storage waiting for the verdict of your case. So that's why it's such a difficult place to be in, this non-stop limbo. Where will I be next week? I don't know. Where will I be next month? Where will I be at Christmas? You have no idea.
Yeah, we have those in Sweden too.
Yeah.
Called förvar, which I think also is like storage.
Yeah.
But she isn't from Uganda, your person.
No, because then when once we actually were starting to make the film, when we had funding and we were, funding starts to dictate decisions, and they'll say, oh, we have funding from Belgium. Can you find somebody in Belgium? And so you kind of have to evolve to what you're given. And I thought, okay, let's see what happens. We had a casting director there. She presented us with lots of options. I mean, not that many, because it was quite specific with who I was searching for. And we met with 10 different women in Brussels, and Babetita comes in. She walked in character, had already dressed up for the role, in what her mind what might be somebody who had been on the road for a while, and she totally fooled me. I thought this was her real look. Generally in real life, she's very glamorous, and she's like this glamorous actress, and I had no idea. But she did this interrogation scene, which you see in the film. And she did it so well that I was like, oh my God, felt terrible, and I believed her, and I felt very strongly for her. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is a movie, my own movie. And so she caught my attention quickly. Then we went to Iceland with, have to share the videos with other people to get feedback. But I knew in my heart, I'm like, she's going to be the one. And she was massively dedicated, and my concern was always to be true and authentic, and there's a different accent, and she speaks French and she speaks Creole, which is spoken in Guinea-Bissau. So instead of forcing her background, trying to deal with accents, trying to deal with make-believe, she did her own research. She went to Guinea-Bissau, and she knew people that didn't feel comfortable and safe sharing their sexuality. It's not, they don't have a kill the gays bill by any means, but but for me, it felt more about the character, and let's make this be true and believable for her as the actress to portray this, instead of, you know, I don't want, you know, all of Uganda to be like, it sounds nothing like Ugandan. And so sometimes, you know, you make decisions that work for the part of the character. And so Babadita, she she chose the name for the character, she chose the date of birth, she put everything into it that from her background. She used names for her own family members, and so that's, you know, we collaborated in that way. So it's.
What is the situation for immigrants in Iceland? Because here it's a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a growing issue. For me, I noticed it a lot in 2011 and 12. Then it had been a few, you know, if I go back maybe 2009 and 10, it was new for us then. Now, sadly, we've become a little bit too used to it. Like, it becomes a norm to read in the paper, oh, this person is deported to Iraq, or this person is deported to some country where they don't feel safe. And that's the sad thing. People become immune to tragedy, and it just becomes like, oh, another page in the newspaper. So yeah, but it's definitely an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, but that exactly what I said in the beginning when in Swedish, that I think it's very important that we have films that give faces to these stories, because otherwise we're just dealing with statistics.
Exactly.
And it isn't about people.
Yeah.
And I think, do you think that there's like a trend now, if you make a contemporary movie about European society, then this is hard to leave out?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably, and it did. I was surprised, kind of, when I was developing it. I was worried that somebody else was going to be doing the same thing. So, but I was a bit surprised. I'm like, why aren't people covering this? Because this is Iceland as well. You know, it's not all horses and beautiful landscape, which, you know, is there as well. But this is kind of, you know, the everyday world. So yeah, it's true. It's hard to make European films without, you know, considering our everyday reality.
About the shoot, I know every film shoot is difficult, and here you had a language barrier,
Yeah.
a child, and a cat.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work?
Crazy. Yeah, it was totally a very difficult shoot, I will say. The child was the easiest. Eldar, the character who's played by Patrick Nökkvi, he's just a dream to work with. And we took 6 months searching for the right child, and so he was the easiest. But of course, you know, there are some limitations when you have a child. You know, you have to try to deliver the child to their home by somewhat of a decent hour. But to eat, you know, all kinds of things. But he was very funny. He would say to Kristín, his co-actress, who plays Laura, say, Kristín, are you bored waiting? Because they're always waiting. She's like, sometimes. He's like, yeah, we have to wait a lot. And then he says to Kristín, just so you know, you just have to get used to waiting, because that's just what, you know, part of the role. To explain to her. And he actually said at the Sundance Film Festival, he said, everybody was asked what they learned from the film. And he said, I learned to wait. That's what he learned. But no, but it was definitely difficult. Of course, as you see, there's lots of types of weather. So we have to just deal with whatever weather we get. And sometimes you have to direct the child in Icelandic and the, you know, African actress in English. The cinematographer speaks Polish, Swedish, and English. So if you're directing the child in Icelandic, then you have to, you know, so a lot of double work of, you know, figuring out who didn't understand anything. Okay, let's explain to the person who didn't understand. We had non-actors in some of the refugee scenes. All of these people who are not the lead characters, they're non-actors. We looked, and I asked my casting people to search for people who had, you know, were real and had, many of them, you know, had been former refugees. So that becomes a bit of a challenge to explain to non-actors how making a movie works. Yeah, and then you never have enough time, you never have enough money. So every day is like, hurry up and act, okay, and cut, let's move on. And And the cat. That's
Good
don't,
cat.
huh?
A good cat. Or
Mm,
did you have many cats?
no, no. It was it looks great on screen. In reality, it was like one of the. He was the hardest, the most biggest prima donna on set was the cat.
But you didn't kill it.
No, 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 no. But he had a mother or owner that sometimes would say, he's tired today. He needs to take the day off. We're like, we have to shoot this scene. So sometime, there is a moment in the scene when you don't see a cat, but you see a cage, and you have to imagine there's a cat in there, because it was the day that I said we need the cat for this scene. They're like, no, he can't make it. His mother says he needs to rest. Okay. So there was lots of things.
And you mentioned Sundance because you won. What prize did you win? You won a
We
big
won
prize.
we won the directing prize there. It was great.
And you won another prize in Göteborg.
Göteborg, yeah, the Fipreski, the Critics Award, which was great as well.
So when you came to Sundance, the film wasn't too European after all, obviously.
Apparently not. He was given a slot in the World Cinema category. So, but I took it as a compliment. The Europeanness, I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask you? Yeah, I was going to say this. The film has a happy ending. I can tell you, not many of our films have happy endings. And so we're very glad for that. But it also gives kind of a hope. Do you feel hopeful? Does it?
Well, let's see. It's when I was writing it, I had this idea of ending, of cutting out before the final verdict. But then it just feels like I've kind of feel like I've traumatized the audience for a long time. I put them through a lot, so it's like give them a glimpse of something, because otherwise it could, I didn't want it to feel too flat. And yeah, and it is in the ending that we have Laura, our character, is faced with a dilemma and has to make a choice, and that it felt to me like that would be her natural choice. So, it's not so much that I'm hopeful; it's that I feel like that's what she would have done. So I think she felt, like this is what she wanted to do. So, I think maybe sometimes if you don't obey the rules, it could be helpful.
Yeah, and she doesn't, but she does in the end. Anyway, so thank you so much. And the film is opening on Friday.
Oh yes, and and if anybody wants to use the hashtag, would you using the hashtag and breathe normally?
Oh, that's the question I'm going to ask.
Oh,
the title. The title, we had so much problems with the title because we want to translate title. We don't want to have an English title on an Icelandic film. But we do.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And it refers to what?
Yes, well, it refers to when you're on an airplane. Because the film kind of takes place at an airport. Its physical location is Keflavik Airport area. And both of them are somewhat, surrounded by these airplanes. Adja is stuck. They're both stuck in a way. And there was something about the word breathe that I was working with when I was in the writing stages. And I was thinking about what we hear when we're on airplanes. And we're often told to put the mask on ourselves first, and then the child, and breathe normally, is what we're told. But when are we told to do this? When maybe the plane isn't doing so well. So that's when we're supposed to breathe normally. For me, it's like the most, massive denial to just breathe normally and pretend like everything is fine. So for me, it's a sense of denial, of just like, carrying on, just fighting through when things are not going so well. And that's how these characters, what they're dealing with, breathing normally despite it all. So that's the.
And we didn't translate it because.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
But you have in Icelandic. But it's sort of the situation that we all are in now. We're in a panic situation in a way, and still we're expected to be completely calm and breathe normally.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.